probably could have made a commercial and made a pretty good money out of it. But like I say, nowadays there's just not enough. There's just not enough people in the industry to manufacture stuff like this. And corn grinder. What?
I think it's like sand.
Well, this is actually ballast from the woodland scenes, plus a few other chunks that just roll down there. It's always interesting when a spider web comes out. I gather you get some sort of auger in there or something? Exactly. Yeah. Well, it's more of a paddle wheel. But an auger would have same idea, thing rotating that just to push it, pushing something out. And then and then you got your levers in there. The what? What?
My mic is on. Okay, everybody. We're here tonight on the weathering show, although maybe tonight we should call it the Airbrush show. Just going to cover some points that were covered in Joe's locomotive shop. I did a show with him on airbrushing, and there's a bunch of things I'd like to cover. I'm no expert at airbrushing, although I've done it for quite a long time. And just a few little tips that I can pass on. If it'll make your airbrushing go a little easier, then my job is done. One of the things I wanted to cover was product and airbrushes. I'll just give you a shot here of my collection. So the first one here, this black handled one, is a Badger 350, and it's what they call a single action suction feed. So what it does is it uses a bottle attached on the bottom here, and the bottle has your paint in it. And no, why won't that fit in there? Come on, there we go. Okay. So the bottle usually has the paint in it, and it's single action. So as soon as you push the button down, you've got air coming out, you've got paint coming out. But to get it to the amount of paint that you want, you have to adjust this cone here. And once you get it all set, then every time you pull the button or push the button, you get your paint and it comes out the way you want it and you do your job. This airbrush for me is 40 years old. It's still going. I still use it. And they still have parts for it. And this takes there's an O-ring inside that you can change out. I started to use lacquers, and the rubber ring that was in there started to go hard, and of course they just crystallized and poof, it's gone. Well, since the advent of this brush, Badger has come out with a neoprene O-ring that the solvents don't bother. So it's good that way. The next brush is also a Badger brush, and I found this out today. This used to be my wife's brush. I inherited this, and for some reason I didn't like it. I don't know why. That's when I got this one. This brush here, if you buy just the brush alone, it comes with a hose, you're talking it's about $50. The range with extra bottles and all that kind of stuff, it runs from about 39 to 79. So if you get the brush by itself, it's 39. If you get it with the hose and a few other attachments, it's $50, up to 75 with 3 or 4 bottles. Not a bad price for a starter. This one here is basically the same thing. The 200 is the price range on this one is a little bit higher. It's 56 to 85. This is also single action suction feed. You'll notice I have a little attachment on here, and I have it on my other brushes as well. That's for a quick release for the hose. I don't use this brush anymore, so I don't have it. But you'll notice the threaded part here where the hose goes is it's only 1/8 inch, what they call 1/8 inch, and the hose, if you want to adapt it to some of the other brushes, you'll notice this one here that's a 1/4 inch thread on it. And they make adapters so that you can use the 1/8 inch hose that comes with this to go on that, or you vice versa. Anyway, this is suction feed brush, same thing, single action. You push the button, and the adjustment is in the back here. So you pull the needle out, loosen the screw, pull the needle out slightly, tighten the screw, and then test it again until you get the right flow of paint that you want with the air. And the air that I usually use, the amount of air, is anywhere from about 12 to 15 pounds PSI. I'm not going to go metric on you. It's about 12 to 15 PSI. You can use a higher pressure, but by using a higher pressure, you stand the risk of different things happening when you're painting that are not really wanted. And I'll go over those a little bit later. The next brush is a dual action. Now this brush, I use this for doing my my dull coat with now. I have the dull coat in, what I do is I split the bottle and I make it so that it's 50-50 with lacquer thinner. And I was able to get a special, I can't tip this because the liquid's in it, but you can see there's this bottle is different in size, in diameter than that one. But the angle that the paint spout comes out on is the same. That's actually the angle that was designed for Pache brush. And this fits on the same way the 350 does, like so. And that's the bottle of dull coat that I get. Right now it's thinner in there. That's what I use to clean it. But it's a brush I don't even know the name or the company that made this. It came with the small compressor that I bought. The compressor I bought had the regulator on it, and it also had a moisture trap on it. And after I go over these, I'm going to go over moisture traps with you because I think it's an important point. That the companies put the moisture trap in the wrong spot. But anyway, this is dual action. And it again is suction feed, but the difference with this one is when you push down, all you get is air. When you pull back is when you get paint. So you push down, pull back. Push down, pull back. And the more you pull back, the more paint you get. So if you only want a little bit, then you only pull a small amount. I think, and I'm not sure, I think this brush was made in China, but this little knob here should have been on this side, so it restricts the amount of movement backwards. Right now, this makes no sense. As I thread that in, it starts to open up the paint valve. So, and I don't want to do that. Usually you put it behind the valve so you can only go back so far but this is dual action, so it's push down for air, pull back for paint. This, like I said, it came with the compressor and it was on sale. It was one of those things like we have here in Canada, Canadian Tire, which is similar to your Harbor Freight in the States. And they have deals every once in a while. You buy the compressor, they throw in an airbrush, and that's what came with my compressor. Now, the one that I use for all of my painting, these two actually, are basically the same. These are what they call gravity feed. So they come with a top so you don't spill the paint once you put it in there. But again, it's push down, pull back, push down, pull back. And on this, there's no way that I can regulate how far back the needle goes. But they have the attached, like this one here, you can actually take the needle in and out with this. And usually it's only for cleaning when you undo this and pull it out. On other brushes, the needle is controlled how far back it goes, like on the black one. Oh, come on. There we go. So this has the 1/4 inch. This has the quick release. Now, the reason why this doesn't have the quick release is because here's my moisture trap. This is an add-on. Badger they don't make this particular thing, but they have this built into their hose. It's about a foot down from the airbrush. And then you have about 5 feet of hose going to the compressor. And I'll explain that.
While you're talking about a couple of those different airbrushes, Bill asks, I've got a couple questions for you if you'd like to take a few of these now.
Sure, go ahead.
Bill asks, are certain airbrushes used for different paint jobs that you would do? Is there, or elaborating or adding to my own question is there a particular airbrush that is used for a particular task? What's the benefits and pitfalls of those? And then to add to that, Human City asks, as a beginner, should he consider a single action or a double action?
If I was going to recommend to somebody to get an airbrush, I would recommend a double action. I'm not saying that the single action is a bad choice. My personal choice would be the double action. Since I've been using the double action, I like it better than the single action. Like I say, I still use this, and I use this for doing solvents and stuff now. You can get, and I've priced a whole bunch of brushes so that you can get an idea of what the prices are like. These two run about the same price. So anywhere from 50 to 75 bucks as a kit. This one here came with the compressor, have no idea what it's worth by itself. But these three are suction feed. And if I was going to buy, suction feed is great when you have a lot of painting to do, so you can fill up the jar and have at it. If you only have a little bit of painting to do, and when I say a little bit, these cups on these things here, they take a lot of paint, and that goes a long way. So to do a really small job, you may only need 3, 4, 5 drops in there of paint. This one here is an Iwata. It's an Iwata CR. Revolution CR. Yep. This one here is a Badger. And the nice thing about this, I can actually take this, and if I was left-handed, I could take this cup off of here. I could take this plug out of here and switch it around. Put the plug back on the other side, and away I go. But right now I don't want to do that. But this brush here, when I bought this was 6 years ago. I bought it at Columbus, Ohio, at the IPMS meet in Columbus, Ohio. Cost me $80. It's a beautiful brush. It really is. And when I was saying about this little screw on this other one should be on this side, well, I can do that with this brush. When I pull back here, I have the full swing of the full motion of the button or the plunger. As I start to screw this in, I only get limited motion. So if you want to do really fine lines, and once you decide or figure out how far back gives you the line you want, you just leave it, lock it, and away you go. And every time you pull, you're going to go to that same spot. Again, the quick release, because on this brush, I have the moisture trap in the hose. Now, the Iwata came with the 1/4 inch opening. This here came with the 1/8 inch opening. But once I put the quick release on, I could have got the quick release to fit on this as well, and everything would be all good in the, as they say in the state of Denmark. Since my wife's Denmark, I use the phrase. My wife is Danish. This one here is the one I do most of my airbrushing with, and I use this for the Badger one for fine detail. It has a smaller needle in it. This one has a 0.5 needle in it, which is a large needle. This one here has a 0.3, I believe. Now they have, in the series, they have three of these. Renegade series, it's called Spirit, Velocity, and Rage. And this one here is called a Spirit. The Velocity has the built-in cup like this, and the Rage is like this. But it's dual action, not like that. Now, the moisture trap on the close to the brush and the moisture trap at the compressor. In doing my job when I was working and all the physics and all the stuff that went along with doing the job, I understood why the moisture trap didn't work on the right off the compressor head. When you compress air, it heats up. And when you heat up air, it holds more moisture. The only way you're going to get that moisture out is to condense it. And when it's coming out hot, right into the moisture trap, it's not condensing because it's still hot. But about 3-4 feet down the hose, it starts to get cold and the water drops out. And by having this moisture trap on the bottom, it captures the air or the moisture. And this part here is just like a tire valve. It has the little button that you push, release the air. So when you're holding it down like this and you push that button, all the moisture comes out of that trap and you continue on airbrushing. Otherwise, you're going to end up seeing splotching on your paint. It's going to go funny, and water and paint don't mix. Doesn't matter whether it's acrylic or not. You're going to have trouble if you have too much moisture in the air.
Is that true of any of the compressor types? Human City asks, do you use small compressors, I suppose like the bench top, that are designed for air compressors, or one with like the tanks, like I have and use?
Okay.
Does that affect? So which do you prefer? And to add my own question to it, does that affect the consideration of heat and moisture traps?
Yes, it does. And I have both. I have the small one for working remotely because the big one's too big and bulky to move around. But the big one has the tank on it. Once the air goes into the tank, big tank, my compressor that I use with the tank on it was designed for pneumatic tools, not for airbrushes. but it has a regulator on it, and I can regulate it down to 12 pounds, and it works great. It's just that when you're airbrushing and it comes on, it scares the crap out of you. It's so loud.
I can attest to that.
So
Yeah, I can attest to that for sure.
That the fact that the air goes into the tank, the moisture drops out in the tank, you have to eventually, there's a relief valve on the bottom of the tank to let the moisture out. And if you do that, don't do it in the house, because the inside of that tank is going to be all rusty from the moisture and the air that's going in there, and it'll leave a rust stain. If you're on a carpet, it'll stain the carpet. If you're on a tile floor, it'll even stain the tile floor.
Huh.
Yep. So if you're going to release it, make sure that you either have some sort of bucket under it or you take it outside. I did that the first time I emptied it, and I had on a brand new pair of sneakers, and I just happened to get my foot with the discharge, and my sneakers turned orange. I could never get it all out. But anyway, that's fact of life. So the other thing about the small compressors, some guys will complain that they can feel the pulsing of the piston. And when you're doing small stuff like this, unless you're doing really, really fine work where your needle is 0.2 and stuff like that, the pulsing is not going to affect the paint job you're doing. For the type of work we want to do on the railroad, not going to affect it. For somebody that does fine detail like airbrushing, photo retouching, or retouching photos and so on, then yes, then you want a reliable air source, which would be a tank. So you don't get that reverberation of the piston constantly sputtering, if you want to call it that, as it's pushing the air into the tank. You don't get that as it comes out. With the small compressor, most of them nowadays, depending on the brush that you have and the valve that is controlling your air, most of the compressors have a sensor on them that once you've set the pressure, now this is where the cheap regulator comes in. If you set the regulator to 20 pounds, 15 pounds, or whatever, in order for it to achieve that, it has to release some of the air that's coming from the compressor. So it's constantly letting the air off. So that compressor, even though it has a built-in device to shut it off when it overpressurizes, that's not going to happen because the air is constantly coming out from that regulator. The more expensive regulators don't have that, and it will shut off once it reaches the pressure. And it's a pressure that's set in the shutoff switch. It's usually about, I think it's about 65, 70 psi. And once it reaches that, it shuts off. So with a small compressor like that, when you're airbrushing, you want to make sure, and this is a practice to get into, never start your airbrush on the model. Start off the model and go from side to side. Start from the left and go to the right, or from right and go to the left, but never start on the model. When I mix my paints in these with the cup, I actually mix the paint in the cup, and I know the paints that I use, and I have confidence in the paints that I use, to know which ones will mix with alcohol. I use 99% alcohol to thin my paints, make my washes, and so on. And the reason I do that is because when I'm doing my weathering, I want to move quickly on to the next stage, and the alcohol helps it dry. So the more alcohol content you have, let's say 99 compared to 70%, 70% means there's 30% water. 99 means there's only 1% water. So the alcohol in most cases, and depending on the area that you live, you have to be careful because the alcohol may dry before it hits the model. And if that's the case, your paint is dry. You're putting on dry powder. But you can get around that. There's other things you can put into paint. If you live in an area that's very dry, like Arizona, you don't use 99% alcohol, you use 70%. Or you use what they call extender or airflow improver. And what that does is it delays the dry time of the paint so that it has a more of a chance to get to the model, lay down, and you do your paint in light coats, and your final coat is usually a wet coat to give it the gloss. But don't put it all on at once. If you put it all on at once, you're going to have drips all over the place, and you're going to ruin the model or your paint job, one or the other. I guess the model is not ruined because you can strip the paint off and start again. But there are so many different products. Just let me lift my camera and we'll go over some of them for you. I have the paints that I use are Tamiya paints. There you go. And there's a whole range of paints. There's granted they don't have a lot of railroad colors, but that's okay. I usually mix my own colors. Or you can go to Badger and buy what they call Model Flex. Model Flex, their paints are railroad specific as well as just general colors. This one here is CSX Blue, which I'm using right now to do some locomotives. There's also proto paints. These are all acrylics that I'm showing you. Proto paints, and these are made by, well, I'm not sure who they're made by. They're made for Rapido trains, and these are railroad colors. So there's a whole slew of those, railroad specific.
What about the airbrush designed paints? Do you buy very many of the airbrush designed paints? And Human City's asking, are they different than the other paints, the airbrush specific paints? Do you buy some of those, or do you mostly just buy the traditional brushable paints and thin and dilute those as appropriate?
I use what I'm familiar with. I have never had the chance to use the airbrush paints because I'm happy with what I've got. I'll relay a story. I had some, oh geez, I don't even remember the name of the company now, but they made locomotives and so on. They also came out with a paint line. And like I said, I mix my acrylics with alcohol. And I never even thought about this paint. It was the exact color I wanted. So the first thing I do is I take the brush, I put some thinner in the cup so that it fills the cavity down below. And then I'll put the color in and add my thinner, a little bit more thinner if I need it. You can actually mix in the cup with a brush just by stirring it. I also what they call backfeed. So you put your finger on the front of the brush and you pull the air or push the air, and you can actually get it to bubble back into the cup. You have to be careful because it may spatter into your face. So you have to be careful how much air you do. But that's how I mix my paints. Well, with this particular paint that I used on this brush, I put my thinner in, I put the paint in, I stirred it up. And by the time I went and picked up my brush again to use it, which was only seconds, the stuff in the cup, I could actually turn it upside down and it was not coming out. It had turned to jello. It did not like the alcohol. So I learned my lesson. It took me 4.5 hours to clean this brush. And it's not an easy task when you have a gum inside there. The other thing that I use is, and I use them very carefully, is Vallejo Air. If I'm going to use it in the airbrush or paints with the Vallejo paints, I make sure it says air on it, because they're supposedly ready to use directly from the bottle. And the nice thing about the bottle, when you grab the bottle, you may have already seen it, but when you take the cap off, it has a little nozzle on it that when you turn it upside down, you can actually put it into the cup by drops, the number of drops you want, which is a good thing. But they say it's airbrush ready. I don't think it. I don't feel it is, because I'm so used to having my paints thinned, not to a wash, but so that they're thin enough that I put on multiple coats instead of like maybe 5 or 6 coats instead of 2. And by doing 5 or 6, you also get away from if you have any masking jobs done. By doing those light coats, you can actually seal the edges of the tape so that it doesn't bleed under, which is a major problem with masking and masking tape. Now, there's 2 kinds of tape that I use for masking. There's Tamiya tape, comes in 3 different sizes: quarter, half, and 3/4, I guess that is. And these are great. They come in the dispenser with the toothed edge so that you can rip it off nicely. I also use a product called frog tape. Now, frog tape is a product that's designed for house painting. But if you use this correctly, you can get the perfect paint job, the perfect masking job. So there it is, frog tape in the yellow box. They also come in a green box, and the difference between the two is the yellow one is thinner tape than the green one. They both do the same job. They're both designed to seal the edge of your masking job as soon as moisture touches it. That glue forms the seal. So the little trick that I do when I need, this is a 1-inch roll of tape. I'll take it out, I'll lay it out on a piece of glass, I'll take my ruler, and I'll make maybe 2 or 3 pieces or strips from this, do my masking, and when I'm ready to paint, I'll take a paintbrush dipped in water and just go over the edges of all the paint, of all the tape. And what that does is the water seals the edge of the tape so you don't get the bleed over or under. Like I say, the green works as well. It's just a thicker tape. And I found this yellow one is almost identical in thickness and texture to the Tamiya tape. The difference is just this here as it is alone, that's about $6 for that dispenser and a roll of tape. This here is $3.49 at Home Depot. There's a big difference. There's a lot more tape too. This has 60 yards, and I think this is it's in Japanese. Of course, it's not going to tell me. No, it doesn't say how long it is, but it's not very much. So it's your choice. And this whole airbrushing and masking and your masking tape and all that kind of stuff, it's all a personal choice. I can only direct you into a certain area, and it's up to you to make your decision as to which way you want to go. I give you, as far as the airbrushes, which one to use. That's my personal choices. And as if I'm telling a beginner, this is where I think you should start. So I will run over the prices again, and I'll give you some other ones as well. The Badger was anywhere from $50 to $75. The 350. The 200 was 56 to 85. The Renegade, I got it for $80, but on USA Airbrush, that's the company that sells Badger, is $121.20. The Velocity is $112.20, and the Rage, which is the gravity, or not, the suction feed, is $110. The quick release that I use for both the male and female part is $20, $19.20. To get an additional male piece, because if you have more than one brush, you only need the one female piece on the hose, and the other pieces go on the airbrush. That's $5.10 each. The other thing I recommend, if you're going to get an airbrush, is you get some sort of product that, in this case, Badger makes it. It's called Reg Dab, which is Badger spelled backwards. It's called needle juice. And needle juice is $3.57. And what you do with that is you put a drop on your finger and rub it with your thumb, and you take the needle out of the airbrush, and you have to be careful when you do this. So there's the needle, and that point, if you push it the wrong way through your finger, it will actually go right through your finger. It's that sharp. So when I put the needle juice on my thumb and forefinger, rub it together and always go like this to the point. I do it after I clean between each paint job, so that there's always a coating of this on the needle. As a matter of fact, I'm getting it on my fingers right now. So I recommend that. I highly recommend that. And what that does is it stops the paint from drying and adhering to the needle, so that when you go to take the needle out to clean it, if the paint is dry on it, you can't even pull it out, even if this is as loose as possible. This little scroll nut here is just like the chuck on a drill. It has the 4 little pieces inside. As you tighten it, it clamps down on the needle. So
Do you put that needle juice on every time that you clean it, or does the cleaning process remove or degrade?
Every time I clean it.
I assume so.
Every time.
Yeah, Human City asks, is there a difference between the paint and a wash, or from an airbrushing process to a paint, or what are the use cases? I suppose might be relevant too.
Okay. I showed you the Model Flex paint. That is full strength, and I spray this full strength because this is designed to go directly into the airbrush. This is from Badger, so I don't change this. But the Tamiya paints are what I use. I can use them as a paint just like this because they're also acrylic. I just have to thin them a bit because they're not made for airbrush, although they are fine enough particulate in it that it will not clog your airbrush. That's the Tamiya. So when I'm making a wash, it's usually because I want to change the color of something. I don't know whether you'll be able to see the difference here. Yeah, okay. So looking inside this locomotive, you can see the color red. It's a fair turn. I want you to see inside. So the inside is a bright red. So when I do a wash, I'm usually making a thin wash, which is 90% alcohol, 10% paint, to tone it down so that it's not a bright red anymore. See the difference?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's, and when I'm doing my weathering, I always fade, even if I'm doing a light weathering job, because the day the car or locomotive comes out of the shop is the only time you're going to see it that color. The next time you see it, a week down the road, 2 weeks down the road, every time, as each day goes by and it gets hit by the sun and the rain and so on, it gets lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter until sometimes the paint even washes off. So I start. Go ahead.
Yeah, a dilution of paint that's made for a wash and a dilution of paint that's made for an airbrush are not necessarily that dissimilar. I think from watching you, it seems like the use case where, if you're going to run through an airbrush, it's a complete, it's a big picture that you're painting it. Whereas a wash, the goal is that it sinks into cracks, et cetera, that you
Okay.
collect
Well,
some pigment.
just to give you an example, I mix 90% alcohol, 90%, 99% alcohol with 10% paint. This is a solvent-based product, and it's called a wash. This is not meant to go through an airbrush. This is meant to be applied with a brush and taken off with mineral spirits, to manipulate with mineral spirits. Whereas when I do the wash, I do it as if the sun is fading the top and the upper portion of the sides. So that's how I make that. And I usually do it in the bottles like this. I just put the alcohol in here now. I can put paint in here to show you how it's done, but it's basically just and I've done it so often now, I don't even measure the white anymore because I know how much 10% is. If I take one of these little eyedroppers, if I take that much paint in that tube and put it in here, that's all I need. And this then gets filled up to the top. I never fill it right up with alcohol until after I get the paint in and I've shaken it up. Then I put the extra alcohol in. But this is a neat little thing to get if you can get it. If you can't get this size, there's also this size. I think it was Testers that put this one out at one point. You squeeze it this way like a plunger. It's got a bellows on the end. But as far as this one goes, all you need is that much paint from my thumb to the tip. And the idea of the wash is not to fade it all at once. You have to do it in stages. It's better to go light as you're painting than to do it heavy, because if you do it heavy, you can't take it off. I mean, you can, but that means cleaning the paint off the model and starting over. If you do it in light coats, you can stop. I usually do about 3-4 coats. I stop, let it dry completely, and then if I want more, I continue on until I get the level of fade that I want. There are little tricks to doing fades as well, and it helps to know your color chart. If I'm painting a red locomotive like that one, I will add a touch, 1 drop or 2 of green paint to my white. And I always use the white. Some people use gray, but I always use white. And by using the green paint, it changes the value of the paint that comes out. The red. If it's a green locomotive, I put 2 drops of red because they're opposite each other on the color wheel. and it changes the value of the paint. It's not so bright, stark. It turns it sort of more of a pastel color as you go down, the more wash you put on. And once it's done, it's done. It's perfect. And the way you want it, I seal it with, now this is where I have to make my decision. Am I going to use the solvent-based stuff, or am I going to continue with acrylics? If I'm going to continue with acrylics, I can use dull coat. If I'm going to go on with the washes and the streaking grimes and so on, the solvent-based stuff, then I will use Tamiya semi-gloss or gloss or even flat, but it's an acrylic and it's not attacked by the solvent. Dull coat, and I found this out when I was doing a demonstration in the train show in Ottawa. I was working on a big CP 4400, and I'm putting the solvent on, and I had the engine prepped the night before with the dull coat, so it had good 20 hours of dry time. Start working on it with the solvent, and I'm where are these lumps coming from? And when I realized it was the solvent was actually taking the dull coat off and creating these lumps of clear, or whatever you want to call it, the dull coat. So from then on, I stopped doing that with the dull coat. The dull coat now is my final coat. Dull coat seems to have, to me, a better finish than a flat coat. You never ever, it doesn't matter, never ever see a true flat finish on anything unless it's actually painted that way. It has some sort of sheen to it, especially after being out in the weather. It started out shiny, but now it's not shiny anymore. It's a low luster sheen, and that's what I get with the dull coat. And I mix my dull coat at 50-50 with thinner.
And Human City says to dull the object initially, and he may be talking about the fading, but he says you use white, not black ? So you're not using any other colors, just the white, which I have seen people use gray.
Just white. Even on a black locomotive, I'll use white, but I'll put a touch of blue in it, just so that the white kind of looks gray, but it's still white.
And Human City also asks a little bit, you're not exactly on a couch for this personal question, I suppose, but he says, are you a very patient person, or how patient do you need to be?
That's a good question.
I don't know. I found Airbrush. There's a bit of anecdotal information.
To me,
there.
using the airbrush to me is relaxing. It gives me the opportunity to just concentrate on one thing, and everything else goes out of my mind. So if it doesn't turn out, yeah, I get frustrated. Yeah, I get ticked off, and you may hear some choice words once in a while. Like the one time I was doing CN RDC done in the 1954 paint scheme, and I had all the artwork on the nose and everything, and all finished. The stainless steel was looking just like stainless steel, brand new. And then I took some Krylon clear. I will never use Krylon again. What it did to that paint job is it went right through the paint and crazed the plastic. I couldn't even strip the paint off and do it over again. The plastic was all wrinkled. Now, the thinner that I use for my dull coat is not just any old thinner. This is what they call a hot product. If you know anything about paints, this is a hot product. This has not been diluted with any other chemicals. This is lacquer thinner. And lacquer thinner, usually you can take paint off with it. But when I mix it into my testers. It's 50-50. The lacquer thinner does nothing to the plastic or the paint job. So whatever they had in that spray can, and I've since found out Krylon seems to change their recipe for different things every once in a while without telling anybody. So I stay away from it. The only spray can product I use is Rust-Oleum, and I use that for my painting my trucks. Now, I say the only spray can I use. I have a spray can of Dull Coat, just in case I run out of the bottled stuff. I don't like using this because, well, there's $8. Okay. That as a full bottle, I think was $4. And I cut it 50-50, so that's $2. And there's maybe $1 worth of thinner, maybe even less than that, 50 cents worth of thinner. And it goes 10 times further than this does. So to me, it makes sense to do it this way. With the airbrush, I get a finer mist from the airbrush than I do with this. Although there are ways to increase the quality of the spray of these cans without adjusting anything. Like that nozzle stays the same. It's the same nozzle. It doesn't matter which way you do it. But what I do, if I have to use a spray can, I do it with the Rust-Oleum as well. I'll take this can, I'll run the water in the sink to the hottest I can get it from the tap. I'll let the sink fill up a little bit so that I have about half or 3/4 of the can submerged in the water. While it's in the water, I'm doing this. I do it for about 5 minutes. Take it out of the water. In between those 5 minutes, every once in a while, take it out of the water, shake it up, put it back in again, do it again. Keep doing that for 5 minutes. And when you spray it the next time, what it does, the heat thins the liquid that's inside, and it increases the volume of air that's in there by heating it up. And I say air, it's not. It's compressed something. I'm not sure what they use nowadays. A lot of places are using carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide, yeah. So I'm not sure what the propellant is in this, but what it does is because of the added pressure that's inside the can, it comes out as a finer mist than normal spraying, and you don't get those little bumps that usually come from a spray can. They call it orange peel. My primers I use, I have a product called Stynylrez. Where is it? Also made by Badger. Not that I'm promoting Badger, but these are the things I found. I'm relaying to you the things I found, and I've gone through quite a few. So Stynylrez, Stynylrez. And this stuff here, it's a little bit thicker than normal paint, and it's supposedly, and I've used it. They say to use it just the way it is in your airbrush without thinning it, and it lays down a perfect coat of primer. It comes, I think, in 12 different colors. This bottle here is 4 ounces. No, 2 ounces. No, it's 4 ounces. The Canadian price is $16. So in the States, knock off 30%, maybe even more. But it's made by Badger. That's one primer. They also have, who's the other primers? I don't have them here. Oh yeah. MIG primers, MIG ammo, Vallejo, basically the same thing. I used these, and I swore I'm not going to use them anymore. So now I have 2 full bottles of this stuff. It'll never get used. I used to use automotive primer that for doing your car, the gray, the red, or they even had a black one. And I like the black one because when I wanted shadow in the corners, it gave that just a little bit of shadow through the paint. And that's where your layering comes in. So you can add as much paint as you want or not. What else? Oh yes, the different thinners. If you're going to use any paints, I suggest you use their thinners to start with. So my starting suggestion for an airbrush is the best brush that I've seen on the market so far in the double action is the Patriot 105. That's made by Badger. It's $88. Or you can go the 105 Extreme, which is $110. And the Extreme has the control on the back like this to control the screw on the back to control how much your plunger comes back. It also, you can get it in different size needles. There's also and this is more of a detail brush. It's called a Sotar 2020. It's also made by Patriot. That's $159.60. They have a chrome, which is a cross between a 2020 and the Patriot, and that's $130. Your Model Flex paints, these things, they're $2. This is American prices, $2.79 a jar. Their compressor that they have on the site on USA Airbrush is with a regulator is $159. The air hose designed for Badger brush with the moisture trap built in is $35. The Iwata Revolution that I have here, the CR, is $120. You can get the Iwata High Performance Plus HP-C is $212, or you can get an Eclipse, which is $164. Don't get hung up on the price. There's a video on my weathering Facebook page, Weathering a Touch of Yesterday. There's a video there that explains the different brushes. And the one guy there, the way he was explaining it, his wife went out and she wanted to know what she could get him for his birthday. So she went out and spent $300 on an airbrush for him. And he hardly ever uses it because even though it was an expensive brush, his cheap Patriot 105 is the one he uses all the time and is more comfortable with. So it's all a matter of personal preference. You have to start somewhere, so you have to bite the bullet. If you want to buy the 350 as a starter, that's fine. Nothing against that. It's cheaper than the 200. I would personally recommend that you go with the dual action, not the single action. It's easier to control. It's so much, well, again, it's personal choice. I just love the black brush that I have, the Badger, this one, and I love the Iwata. And both of those brushes are around the same price. So this was 100. This goes right now at 121.20, and this here is 119. So take your pick. You can spray. You can get the large canisters of propellant that your hose will hook up to. But you don't get to spray very much with the canister, and they get expensive. It's $20 a can. So if you're going to bite the bullet, at some point somebody says, well, what do I do? Well, I'm going to go out and buy the cheap one, and then the cheap one breaks. Well, it was doing okay. I'm going to get another cheap one. By the time you get to a certain point, you're going to say, I wished I had gotten the better one, because then I wouldn't have gone through 2 or 3 brushes to get there. Just saying. One of the other things, okay, I'm almost done. One of the things that I use as well for helping me clean is pipe cleaners. There I have a black one that I use. This is a very fine black pipe cleaner. Once I take the needle out and I take the tip off the end, so if I take the needle out, you'll see the needle disappear. It won't come to a point anymore. There. Once that comes out, then this little tip unscrews, and I can put the pipe cleaner in to clean the channel inside here, because paint does move back into there. When you're painting, it's best to use, yeah, it's best to use, what do you call it? Airbrush cleaner. You can, and there's a little video on my page that teaches you how to make your own airbrush cleaner as well. So it comes down to how much money you want to spend, what you actually want to get out of it. If you want the better brush, I suggest you save for it and get the better brush, because you will not be unhappy with the choice. I can almost guarantee that. But if you get one like this, you're limited to what you can do with it. If I'm painting something that's really fine on my layout, maybe I want to paint, I have the jar on there and I want to paint the rails or whatever, the jar is constantly getting in the way. And I can't turn it sideways, otherwise the paint will come out the air holes that are in the top of the jar. So by having a brush like this, I can get down real close. I can get right down. So the point is right down at the rails or whatever. And I don't have to have paint spraying all over the place either, because I can't get down close enough. The other thing that I use for cleaning, once I take that tip off, if you go to the drugstore, you can get this. It's for picking between your teeth. It has a little brush on the end of it, flexible brush. And that fits right inside the opening where your needle goes. And it will also help you clean out the brush. So that's about it. If you have any other questions, don't be afraid to ask. Put them at the bottom of the notification on our page, and or send me a message. Ask the questions. I will answer them. So there we go. That's it. So when's the next show, Johnny? Oh yeah, I forgot today was Wednesday. Johnny's show is tomorrow night. And no, we won't be talking DC or DCC. So you can lay that to rest. Andy and I are still friends. We still talk to each other. And,
occasionally.
Yeah. So we're good. So tomorrow night, and then Saturday night. Saturday night is the Railroad Empires. Not me.
We try.
No, I'm good. Just seriously consider, if you want an airbrush, search around, get some prices. And it's too bad we didn't do this when was it? Back in January, Andy, when Badger had their 56th birthday, everything was 56% off. Everything.
Yeah, it was significant.
So I bought another airbrush. Like I don't have enough. I bought another one.
You needed another one, surely.
I actually can't remember whether it was one or two. But hey, these things are great. If you're going to get anything, if you get the Badger and you're just going to use the hose, then get the one that's built into the hose. Great thing to have. Doesn't matter where your air is coming from. So that's it for me. Like I said, if you have any questions, send me a line, and I'll see what I can do for you. I'll even give you a list of all the paints I use. And I've got quite a few. So there we go. What do you got? You got anything, Andy?
He says, Great Express just asked, can you mix the Tamiya paint and Tamiya extender with alcohol?
Actually, yes, I can go. I can do that. I can show you that. So like I said, if you're going to use any paints, use their thinner. Well, Tamiya has 3 different thinners. Let me tip this up. Okay, so first off, they make an airbrush cleaner. This has the pink cap. And what this is a mild form of acetone. So be careful with it. Be careful with all of them. Next up is the regular thinner for their acrylic paints. It's X20A. And this is good if you don't know how the model is going to react with any of the thinners you're going to use. Best to experiment before you actually start doing your main work. So this, I can give you Canadian prices, but it won't mean anything to you. So I'm not going to even try. The next thing up and I've used this, both of them, lacquer thinner. Tamiya lacquer thinner, not the can that I showed you before. This is Tamiya lacquer thinner. Like I said, if you're going to use a product, use the one that goes with the paint. So this yellow cap is the regular lacquer thinner. Now, Tamiya paints were originally designed as a acrylic lacquer paint. And because of the environmental laws that we had in North America, they had to change their paint. So they turned it to a straight acrylic paint, hence the 20AX or X20A. But they mix with this, the lacquer thinner, and then there's also lacquer thinner with what they call a retarder in it. And what lacquer thinner tends to do is make things dry like the alcohol does, sometimes before it gets to the surface. So there's an extender in this one, and it has the orange cap. These are all excellent products. I suggest if you're going to be working on your models with these things, I suggest you use nitrile gloves so that you don't, because what'll end up happening if you get this stuff on your hands, you may not feel it right away, but it dries your skin so much, takes the oils right out, and then you end up with cracked skin. If you continue to do that, you're going to end up with places where your skin is going to come apart. You're going to have sores. But it's always a good idea to use the product that goes with the paint. And now that I've said that, I'm going to tell you something else. If you're in a bind, you can use a universal acrylic thinner in almost all of the paints. You have to experiment. And I use this as well. There's the Vallejo thinner. And I don't know whether you guys saw it on the Facebook page, the Model Railroading Live Facebook page, but Testers has dropped the Model Master line, as well as the Aztec line, which this was originally meant for. So I'm not sure how much longer this is going to come out with the Aztec name on it. They may still bring it out, universal thinner, but these Model Master paints, if you use them and you use them a lot, I suggest you go out and scoop up what you can while you still can, because they'll be gone shortly. And I leave you on that. Goodbye, everybody. Take care, stay safe, and have fun.